Welcome to the show, everyone. I have the philosophical rambler, and I'm very excited to speak with him. He is a very professional man, and we are going to provide some great tips and guidance for you guys to take action and accomplish your goals. Take one more step each day to get to the self mastery that we're all looking for. So, first of all, I appreciate you coming on, and I'm very grateful for your time.
Definitely. Thanks for inviting me on, Justin.
Yeah, man. So first, I want to ask, what methods have allowed you to block out the society's noise?
I think that's a really great question because, especially a lot of people nowadays are so overwhelmed with information because we're living in the digital modern age where you can get unlimited information of anything you want at your fingertips. You can search anything, do anything, become anything. And because you have so many options, the noise is really overwhelming. So I think it's really important that we do find ways to sort of mitigate or block out that noise. And probably the best thing that I do would be both going to the gym as much as possible and scheduling time in nature. And both those things sound really cliche, but I've actually found them to work extremely well, especially when you go to the gym on a consistent basis. You can just notice your mindset change. You see everything more positively, and you see how much time you can waste in a day listening to useless media or entertainment or so many different things that just takes up our day. Or scrolling through TikTok, for example, for hours on end. So the gym is definitely a motivational booster, mindset booster in so many different ways.
I
Do you have any
really,
thoughts on that?
the gym is such a powerful tool for all humans. And it's not that weightlifting is the only thing we can do, but for my route, it is almost as if I would not be the professional educated person I am today without an outlet. And that gym or time in nature is such a nice method of letting go of stress and putting your energy into a positive thing that reinforces good habits. It makes our body healthier, which directly is going to increase our performance in life, in the people who we attract, in so many different avenues. But I really, it always sounds cliche, these things that completely shift our lives. When I get outside and go in nature, you can do it alone, you could do it with a friend. In my case, I have two dogs, and man, it's a win-win scenario when I'm helping myself and taking care of my animals, seeing their happiness increase just by going outside, whether it's down the street or actually in a true nature hike. That fresh air, the sunlight, getting away from the screens. It's so important for us to take the time in our busy days, quote unquote busy. I love there's a big difference between productivity and being busy. And I believe you mentioned time blocks and being efficient with your time. That is a big part of not scrolling through TikTok. If I'm not going to go and waste a bunch of time consuming mainstream media or scrolling through unhelpful content, how can I replace that time? We can go to the gym and we can go outside. Those are just the simple, overlooked things that really make a difference in our mood. And when our mood is good, oh boy, then we can produce so much better content and be taking the steps to create the version of ourselves that we desire.
That is 100% spot on. When your mood is peaking and when you have good health, that is when you can produce the best things in the world. And as humans, we can do some pretty incredible things as we've seen throughout history, but we can also do some pretty destructive things. But when we, on an individual level, are able to take that time to refine ourselves and to tap back into tradition of what our ancestors have done and what is really natural for us, I think that really has the ability to transform our lives in so many different ways. And just talking about nature, nature transforms you biologically, like on a physical level, because the oxygen allows you to feel so much more. The word I'd use is whole. It allows you to feel so much more fulfilled. You have so much more energy because so many people today, for their 9 to 5s, they sit in an office building all day, staring at a computer, typing documents, and they look outside and then they go home. But they never actually spend that dedicated time outside. And that's definitely something that both of us agree on, is that people need to spend more time outside, for sure.
If I don't get outside, it is so evident how the emotions, the mood, the even perception of life is downgraded. I have a little house plant both in my office. I have multiple in my office and one in my room. And the point of that, like you said, is those plants, they consume our CO2 that we put out, and in return they give us fresh oxygen. And it's hard for me to imagine working a 9 to 5. I am an employee, but just more of a side hustle to have money coming in, because nothing against 9 to 5s, but the lack of time to oneself, I don't know how people can carry themselves in a good manner. And in fact, I'm not going to go as far to say that people with 9 to 5s are not self-actualizing and looking for personal mastery, but I can almost guarantee the ratio of entrepreneurs who are looking for self-mastery is very high compared to the average person who works in a 9 to 5, because when you are spending so much time indoors, it's almost as if your energy is being drained from you. And when you have less energy, all you want to do is, like you said, sure, you look outside, you see nature, maybe you have the thought, I would like to go on a hike, but when you're working so much, it's almost nighttime by the time you get out. And I really feel bad for people who are stuck in a position where they're not able to get to the gym, or they are not making time for the gym. I love the idea we all have 24 hours in a day, because it's completely true, and it's how we schedule our time, how we aim to be productive. If you don't have an aim, you're not going to hit the target. So it's super important to at least be conscious of how you're spending every minute.
That's very true, because every minute you have to realize you're a human. We often forget when we are not feeling pain, or when we're feeling good, when we're outside in nature. We almost just feel like, well, we're just existing, we're good. But when you have a philosophical concept, is that as soon as you have a paper cut, you realize you're human again. As soon as you see that little bit of blood, you're like, oh, I'm human. And when you realize that you're human and you think about that consistently, time becomes something much more valuable than money. Because when time becomes more valuable than money, your whole lifestyle, your whole mindset will drastically change. In the way that you consume media, in the way that you produce, because you will be enticed to produce because you want to leave a legacy. Like this podcast, this will, if you were to go missing suddenly, this podcast would continue to be listened to over time on the internet. It's something like a legacy. And so when you think about all these people who are spending so much time enriching others, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth for society as a whole.
It's very, very powerful when we acknowledge that time is our most, or let me put it this way, it is our least renewable asset. In that case, it's something we cannot afford to waste. Time has to be invested rather than spent. And I need the purpose of expressing our hearts, what is on our hearts, is exactly that. We want the average person to understand that time is not just money. Money is a tool, and it's a very fabulous tool. But on the other hand, it is not something that you should forever trade your time for. We really need to value our time and learn how to enjoy our time, and by self-educating, learning philosophy, learning ways to enrich or to bring value to others, that is providing an outlet of number one, fulfillment, and number two, we're going to be able to rely upon our own production for income rather than being an employee or a pawn. And it's very okay to start off. We all have to start somewhere. That's a very important thing to understand, that nothing great happens overnight. So we just have to appreciate the smallest wins and consistently pursue what our values tell us to pursue.
That is definitely true. And one thing that I've often thought about is that it's not so much about how many hours that you're putting into something, but rather the quality that you're putting in. Because someone can be working a very high paying 9 to 5, but if they're waking up at say 5 a.m., they're hitting the gym, they're eating a quality breakfast, they're putting those hours in to make say 150 grand a year. And then when as soon as they get back home at say 5:30, 6 o'clock, they spend till 9 to 10 at night working on their brand, working on what they want to leave to the world. And by doing that, they are living the dream, so to speak. If someone can figure out how to fund their creative endeavors by doing their through their own means, then all power to them, because that is an extremely, extremely hard path and something I've often thought about and tried to figure out myself. But it's not for the faint of heart, because you have to forge your own path, make your own connections, and it honestly can take many, many years. If you're an independent artist, or if you're an independent business owner, or you make a craft or whatever it may be, there's a lot of people who make soaps who sell them on like Etsy or eBay, Shopify, whatever, and they're able to pay for their lifestyle, and they enjoy making soap and so forth, and people do that with wood as well. But it all comes down to being able to fund what you love. And so I feel like 9 to 5s are often put down a lot, and not saying that you're putting them down. As you've said, there's a place for them, but it often is something that's needed for people in their 20s, early 30s, maybe late into their 30s, of getting money. Because once they have money, once they are able to have assets, that's when they're able to focus more on their creative endeavors and what they want to do with their life in this world. And I feel like by doing that, by focusing more on money at one time and then creative things at another time, you're able to put more quality in while you're doing that. Say you're putting in so much time for money and so much time for creative endeavors, you may not get the same amount of quality out as when you're focusing solely on one thing. And important piece of one important thought that I've often had is that for the independent business owner, or whoever it may be, independent artist, they're often they often have their back against the wall. They have very little funds. And if they had more funds, if they were, say, an employee at a 9 to 5, they may be able to then promote their work. And by promoting their work through marketing and learning how to sell their craft or whatever it may be, they're often able to then take that on full time within 5 to 10 years or less, depending on how quickly it takes off. And that's something that people definitely need to realize today.
That point at the end that you finished with is very, very much something that I thought about a lot. And it's so I'll open up a bit. What I do in the mornings is I trade the stock market. And at first, that was my sole avenue for my future. I didn't even think about trying to serve others. And slowly, it's interesting how over time, your purpose or what you're destined to do unravels, because the thought of serving others really was not prevalent in my mind until I don't even know what made me want to create the podcast. I guess just realizing that I have value to share, and just like you're doing, it's our job to, once we realize the things that really bring us true joy, now we have to figure out how to make it happen. And it's never going to be easy or a simple route for everyone. I really think there's importance in going all in, but at first or prior to going all in, it might be better to get that foundation of wealth so that you're not back against the wall, so that you can pay for some marketing. Because marketing is a tool, but first we have to kind of figure out what we're going to have marketed. And this whole process is just an evolutionary, continuous cycle of thinking, reflection, and trying to find the best route that we can take. Nothing great happens overnight, so we have to be very patient and persistent with our efforts, but it's very important to learn from others and to keep our minds open so that we can build connections. And who knows, maybe I could have someone build a website for me that, who knows, I would not have had that connection prior to doing what I'm doing now. So it's very powerful how sometimes it seems like the creator or the source or the universe is slowly guiding us down the path that we are desired to go down.
Yes, that brings up a great Bible verse in my mind. To paraphrase the concept, whether you look left or right, God will always guide you. No matter what path you take, in the end, you will arrive at where you need to be. And it's a very solemn but very positive concept at the same time, because no matter what you do, you will arrive at where you need to be. And so it's a biblical concept, but it's also a stoic concept in a sense. And it's one that's often overlooked, because if you are meant to do something and you believe in it, it'll happen. You just have to put enough dedication in.
Right, and to believe in something, that's a step, but beliefs must transpire into action. And that's something that we can't underestimate. If you simply have a belief, that's a good starting point, but now we must take action. A good question I was thinking about, how could I or the average person start to live a more honorable life?
That's a really interesting question, because I think everyone has a different definition of honorable. It's something I've thought extensively about in my time of writing and thinking and studying. It's It could be as simple as getting out of bed for someone, or it could be as complex as raising $100 million for a new children's hospital. It really depends on who you are, what phase of life you're in, and what circumstances you're in. Because God places everyone in different circumstances, environments, and positions with what resources they have. So I feel like living an honorable life is doing the best you can with what you have at the current time. And that's often looking and striving for more, not being greedy with trying to take things or not being reciprocal in what you're giving out, but in always looking to further refine yourself, your craft, what you're doing, and how you can be more efficient and productive. And you talk a lot about that as well. And the thing about that is that if you're able to make your giving and your expression more efficient and more productive, you're able to impact so many more people. And when I first started out with my blog and with books and so forth, I was happy for one person to read it. And I still am because I just wanted to impact that one person. I still have written notes from when I first started of how I was so happy because one person had read an article. Because if you can impact that one person and they internalize that idea that you've written about, they will take that and they will actually act on that in their life. If they believe in you and they believe in what you've written, then that's really, really powerful. And so, getting back on topic, living an honorable life really comes down to you. It comes down to your actions and your daily choices.
That was really beautiful how you learned, or maybe it wasn't even learned, it was just inside of you, the ability to appreciate just one person, knowing that you're affecting them in a positive manner. And by helping one person find themselves and get through the smoke or the distractions of today's world, to guide them down the path that they meant or were created to go down, as long as we're helping one person, that compounds. Because who knows, if we really changed one person's life, then they might go and speak about it to someone that they know locally. And that's how things spread and compound. It's beautiful how by improving oneself and looking to master oneself, that we actually get brought to a point that the only other option is to begin to serve others. And you can't pour from an empty cup. I love the saying because it is so true. How could we ever help other people if we haven't done the work ourselves? And it's so important to value yourself instead of getting your value from other opinions and from others' opinions. And by doing the work to be productive or to handle your situation, do the best with the cards that you were dealt, what else are we meant to do? We all have different situations, but the one thing we can control is who we aim to become, and the small things like how we take action and our thoughts. It's not easy to control your thoughts. It's almost impossible to control the first thought that we have, but when we notice a limiting belief or a toxic thought occur, the quicker that we can rewire our mind to notice and replace that toxic thought, that's the steps. And as long as we're taking those steps, it's so much more important the direction that we go rather than the speed we're going at.
That is very profound in the sense. I was just thinking the mind is almost like the body, in that it almost has a pH. It has an acidity to it when it's toxic. When you think about all the negative thoughts that you have throughout the day, those compound over time and create the acidity and the problems that are in your mind, your mindset, and your outlook on life and your lifestyle. Because all of your perspective on life leads into your outlook, and your outlook becomes your lifestyle. Because if you have a negative outlook, your lifestyle is going to drastically change. Because if you have a negative outlook and don't believe that tomorrow is going to be a good day, why would you not eat that piece of cake today? Why would you not eat a second piece of cake or a third piece of cake? What are the consequences going to be? You often forget about consequences at that point. But you can raise the example of the pH when you're thinking the positive thoughts. And at a certain point, you become so pure and so genuine in your thoughts of trying to help others that you are genuine. You are always genuine at that point. And when you are always being genuine, that's when you will have no regrets. And that's something I've personally learned, is that to free yourself, you must have as few regrets as possible. And that comes from doing hard things. And that would lead me into the next subject on this of living honorably, is the biblical slash psychological concept of carrying your cross or enduring suffering. And that idea is probably the most influential philosophical concept in my life, and something that I've written the most about. And it is an idea that's from Carl Jung, but it's also from Friedrich Nietzsche, and as well as Jordan Peterson. And I really look up to Jordan Peterson, and I will be seeing him in a few weeks on his tour, which I'm really looking forward to. But the point of the concept of enduring suffering is very complex, but yet simple that even a child can understand it. It's very complex in that you can make it as complex as you want it to be, is how I would explain it. A good example is the carrying of your cross. Christ says in the Bible that only those who pick up their cross and carry it and follow after him will be able to follow him and will be able to be saved. And the point of that is that you have to crucify yourself. You have to crucify your past. And you crucify all your regret, all of your negativity, all of the toxic things that you've done in your life. You have to embrace suffering. Because suffering is what will refine you. It will burn. It's a burning fire that takes the impurities out of the silver. It takes the things out of you that you don't need. Because when you're experiencing pain or suffering, whether it be physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual even, when that happens, you become a pure version of yourself. And so whether you're toxic at the time or whether you're positive at the time, when you go through those things, it'll change you and it will reform you into who you truly are, into what your mindset essentially boils down to. And when you boil down to that point and you look in the mirror, that's when you realize how vulnerable you are, how you're in need of meaning for your existence, and how powerful carrying something heavy, such as a burden of trying to help others in the world, really is. Because when you've experienced all that suffering, you're very weak. And humans in general are very weak mentally and spiritually. They can become very strong, but only after they've been broken down. Especially today with so many conflicting worldviews and so many conflicting ideologies. Because ideologies are a parasite on our belief systems, but that is a different subject for another day. But to live the honorable life, someone really has to embrace suffering. And someone might ask, well, what do you mean by suffering? And what I mean by suffering, or what Jung or Nietzsche or Peterson would mean by suffering, is that maybe that is having your back up against the wall as an artist. Maybe that is embracing the hard path that's in front of you, taking your cross, which is the burden of helping others through, say, your art or your business, and actually facing that path. Because a lot of people at that point, when they see something so difficult and so daunting in front of them, so painful and so hard, they will turn away from it and they'll choose the easy path. But that easy path will lead them into what is primarily modern slavery in society. And by modern slavery, I mean the system of keeping people in a society where they are constantly working for no end goal, where they have no meaning. They're a slave to themselves, as many philosophers have said. I know that's quite a lot on the subject, but it's it's a very deep concept.
It is a lot because the subject is such a complex topic that we could really speak about for a long time. You did a beautiful job breaking that down. Um, it is mind blowing how the modern slavery of the system is somewhat unseen when the average citizen is so distracted by ideologies or mainstream exaggerated threats, etc. It's hard for me to understand at some points how the average citizen or just a human in general doesn't realize that they're suffering. For me personally, I understood that I was going down a route that was meaningless. Sure, I could have girls and cars and money, but personally, that was not something that was very meaningful. It's that is meaningful to my ego, but not to my self-image.
How you can live in an alternate culture and how you can look to the past for meaning, because there's very little meaning in today's culture, and that kind of ties into everything we've been talking about in general. Like if you read or listen to classical music, if you enjoy Renaissance art, if you enjoy Victorian art, whatever it may be, if you look to the past, you'll be able to find meaning, and that's something that's really taken a hold on my life.
That's interesting. I haven't looked deeply into those types of arts. I'm just recently getting into amazing people like Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche and all of the books that Jordan Peterson has on his list. But I'd love to hear a bit more about how that looking into the past has shifted your mindset to more of a gratitude aspect, and how much you can learn from the past human work and creative endeavors.
So one way that I have personally learned, as well as many others in the modern age, modern philosophers, well, in the positive sense that they are contemporaries of us, they're alive, they often speak about how you're able to find meaning by looking to the past. And it's the traditionalist movement, which is it's a pseudo ideology in the sense that it's a lifestyle and it's a worldview, but it can be broken down in many different areas. But the simplistic way of explaining it is that traditionalism focuses on the past. It focuses on what we can learn of the benefits from the past, of, say, good parenting of fathers, um, classic art, innovation in technology for the benefit of mankind, beauty in the truest sense of nature, classical art, classical music, um, of whatever it may be. Because nowadays, you see the utter desecration that beauty has endured. Of You see modern architecture that has taken over, say, a cathedral or something of the sort, and we are unable to get those amazing landmarks back. And those are the things that brought so much inspiration and so much benefit to the world. So many great literary works, artistic and musical works, were all inspired because of that world that they lived in at their time, say in the 19th century or earlier. Some of the medieval philosophers as well, or even the ancient philosophers, the world they lived in of nature along with political and social philosophy. But when you look to the past, you're able to see what people lived for. We have this meaning crisis, this existential crisis today, where you see children who are as young as, say, 10, who are feeling depressed, who are feeling all of these very matured negative emotions. And we have to ask, where does that come from? We see so many people who are being diagnosed with mental illness and who are very depressed for valid reasons. And we see that happen because of the negativity and the toxicity in culture. We Where are people applauded for creating beauty? Or a better question would be, who is creating beauty at this point? We do not see beautiful architecture in many areas of the United States. I mean, the rural United States, you're able to see a nature, but it is an impoverished area in many cases. And by being impoverished, who's going to build a very nice building in that area that's in a classical design? The classical design movement is trying to make a comeback, but it's only able to do so in cities like Berlin or London, and in very few cases at that. I've also seen some examples in Dublin, in Ireland. It's only where the funds are, and that goes back to the wealth argument of that we were talking about earlier, because wealth is needed for an artist to be able to do what they love. And so, going back to the basis of the beginning of this topic, is that if someone's able to live fully in a, say, alternate culture of the past, or a blend of the past with what is good of the present, because we are experiencing in this podcast what is good of the present. We are using technology to be able to talk to each other and to be able to publish this podcast. And for others to listen to it, they're going to log on to their phone or computer or whatever it may be. And those are the good things. I have personally met many very, very talented artists over the last month who are creating NFTs, who are selling them. And they create very interesting NFTs, and that's how they're able to make a living. And by interesting NFTs, I mean it is an example would be a poster that's of modern art. It says, "Don't consume media," or something along that line. And it is a very unique piece of artwork that has all the social media icons of Twitter, YouTube, etc., and it's showing how it has ruined a person's brain. It's a very unique piece of artwork. I would encourage you to look at further after this conversation. We can talk about it. And those people are what you are able to find in the modern times. I have also extensively found over the last, about the last week, that there are many very recently founded magazines or journals for the discussion of ideas, and free ideas at that, because obviously nowadays censorship has taken such a hold on society as a whole, especially on social media, with cancel culture and the loss of so many ways of free speech. And these journals and these small movements, I believe, are what are able to provide that meaning.
That is such an interesting idea that we have to mix the past with the new, and there is so much to be appreciated about the new technology. As you said, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing and produce what we're producing without technology. But the point that really intrigued me is that these young children are almost purposeless. They don't have fulfillment, and not like as a young children that is, or as a young kid that's what should be on your mind, but the idea of these children under the age of 15 being depressed, feeling a lack of purpose. How is that even possible? It comes from the abundance of ease at our hands, that these kids don't even feel like they are needed. And that's the intriguing challenge of living in our age today. Is it's not like we are starving. We have shelter. We have so much that it is even harder to find purpose in comparison to the past. There was really less options, which gave us more of a direct route to our purpose or passion. And it takes more self-inquiry and more effort to find one's purpose nowadays. It's very interesting, and I'm glad you brought up the topic of censorship and how we are going to get around censorship. I know for a fact that the free speech is definitely under attack, and it's our jobs to figure out methods or new innovations to get around what the corrupt, I don't even know what their goal is, but the idea of censoring topics is unhelpful. If we need to have intelligent conversations from all sides and come to some sort of middle ground, or at least be able to have the tough conversations. And this kind of intertwines with the importance of the internal struggle, carrying your own cross. If we don't do the harder work to have conversations, even with people we don't agree with, and to strive to be our best, to figure out what we're doing wrong, those are the most important aspects of growth and becoming who you were created to be.
I think that's a very valid point because, especially today, if you look at publishing companies as an author myself, if you look at publishing companies and the whole industry, it is dominated by five big publishing companies. At the top of that would be Penguin Random House. And Penguin Random House is very, very selective of who they will choose for a publishing contract. And by being so selective because of the declining amount of print media in the world, it's very, very hard for an author to become well known. And to become well known at this point is almost a miracle on print. And that's why so many people have turned to articles and journals and so forth online, is because that's the only way they can get their message out. But there's a large demographic who still goes to, say, a Barnes & Nobles in America, and they are going to look and say the political philosophy section. Well, okay, if they're going to go to that section, what are they going to find? They're going to find, most likely, Plato. They're going to find some Aristotle. They're going to find some Rousseau. They're going to find political philosophers from long ago. They're not going to find modern thinkers. And while obviously we definitely need to have these books stocked of the very important historical philosophers, if we do not create our own ideas and we do not move forward in progress of ideas or creating new ideas of any sort, then eventually the culture will die out. And that is a very frightening thing to think about. And maybe the culture has died out on the mainstream scale because so many in America today, largely because of the public education system, do not know American history very well. If they're not being taught American history very well, well, then how are they expected to understand philosophy or religion or art or culture or whatever it may be? They are instead idolizing people on TikTok or YouTubers or the such. And those are the people who are driving the culture, are people such as like Jake Paul or KSI or Mr. Beast. Those are all very influential people who any kid up to maybe a millennial would know, but they will not know very many biblical stories. They will not know practically any philosophy. And that's what really is causing a decay in the culture and also leads to a lack of values. That also ties in well to what we talked about earlier in the traditionalist movement. The traditionalist movement is trying to restore values to society, morality, because we see today people shamelessly attacking the other side on both the right, the left wing. We see it on all sides. People, even in the intellectual communities or the art communities, we see such discrimination based on each other's political or economic beliefs, whatever it may be. There's now this discrimination and this lack of ideas because of this. An example I would give is that someone may want to publish with Penguin Random House. They'll say, all right, so they'll try to first get in a literary journal. Well, the literary journal will only take so many people, and it will be based on a quota of diversity. It'll be based on a quota of how many people for each gender. It'll be based on a quota of how many for each genre of work. So it's constantly becoming a smaller and smaller pool of ideas based on arbitrary guidelines. Whereas if an idea has value, you can think an idea of this would be, if an idea has value, it'll hold its weight in the free market, such as like a product. But we think of this as the free market of ideas, but it's being heavily regulated by ideology and the ideology of discriminatory guidelines. And that stifles creativity in so many different ways.
It's like there is a barrier put around the ability to be creative, and the lack of transparency from the biblical stories. Those stories are seen from the mainstream perspective as negative or unhealthy for a reason that is evident to me because they want. When I refer to they, I am looking at the people like BlackRock, the companies that control almost everything. There is almost, like you said, with the publishing industry, there are big monopolies with mainstream media, and there's monopolies with multiple industries that are limiting the ideas that are allowed to be consumed. The biblical stories are so powerful, not because there's a brainwashing or because that way is the only way, but rather the biblical stories provide values like kindness, integrity, treat others how you would like to be treated, things that make us look inwards and do the harder work of carrying our own cross. When we value the aspects of collaboration and family, striving to be our best self, self-mastery, etc., we are forced to live in a way that is only helpful to other people rather than the ideologies that are being pushed down the society's throat. Like, nothing against Jake Paul, but these people are very materialistic. Materialism is toxic because it's as if there's nothing but cars and women and just the simple world, rather than actually thinking deep about our history and what one should value. It's a very hard topic because I see so many areas that need attention, and it's almost as if our generation right now is the last line before things completely implode.
That is a fascinating point you make that I just thought of, is for the money, the cars, the women that is constantly pushed on, especially young men today. And that's why there's such a crisis among young men of values, of work, of so many different things. We see, for example, Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is a very classic example of materialistic ideology in action. We see how first he would give away, say, $1,000, then it became 5,000 because he needed more viewers to gain more ad revenue so that he could continue to give more and more money away. Nowadays it is 1 million, 10 million. Where does it end? There is no limit to where it'll end, it seems. You can give away $100 million. You can give away 10 Lamborghinis. You can give away so many mansions. But in the end, where does it end? In the end, there has to be a line drawn in the sand. And I don't think we've seen such a consumeristic and materialistic world as we have today with the internet, of you can order anything from anywhere in the world practically, from any business at any time of the day, and it'll come within 2 days. It'll come within a week. And by having so much such a material driven society, I think that's where you lose the values, as you said.
That is a very good way to wrap up the point of, we need to get back to the core values. If we don't, and we continue to rely on a materialistic, I don't even know the word. I'm getting tired, but oh my gosh, like, this conversation, I learned a lot from you. You are one intelligent man,